Hey, what's up, guys? This tutorial number 3 for our Patreon. We'll be covering some cloud creation and shading with Redshift and Houdini. And we'll be able to export this as an open VDB that you can load into whatever app you're using. And you could even render it in other engines if you want. We'll cover the shading part at the end, but for now we'll just cover the basics of creating the clouds. And so Houdini's already got this pretty cool cloud system. Let's drop a grid down and let's just make this, I don't know, 100. So we got a nice sized grid. And let's drop a redshift light in here. Let's just make a sun. And we'll just tilt this down a tad. Okay, cool. And so what's neat about Houdini and the cloud system is you can use any geometry and you can make totally different varieties of clouds. So for our basic example, we're just going to use a sphere. But keep in mind that you could use any geometry. So if you sculpt a cool shape out, or if you even use a character, whatever, right, an animated character, it will follow the form of the base geometry. But we'll be using a basic shape for now, just a sphere. And so we've got the sphere we made. So it's right here. And we're going to dive into it. And so step 1, usually what you want to do is you want to have enough geometry to give it some cool shape. And so right now, you know, the sphere's only got a couple subdivisions if you look at it. And so let's increase this to, like, I don't know, 50 for rows and 50 for columns. Maybe 100 might be better. Let's try 100. Or let's just go with, yeah, let's go with 150. And so that gives us tons of geometry in here. And so the reason why we want all this little geometry is so we could do a mountain deform. And so if you hit tab and start typing mountain, you get this mountain node. So let's plug that in and let's check it out. And so now it created this kind of weird looking jagged shape and stuff. And this will just give us a nice little base for our cloud. And the reason why you want, you know, decent rows and columns is so that way the node has some, you know, enough geometry to deform decently. And so, okay, cool. We've now got our interesting shape. Let's actually squash this so it's a little more cloud-like. So let's squash it this way and maybe go this way a little. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. This weird peanut looking shape. And so next we'll hit tab. And like I said, later on you could use anything as an input. You know, you could bring in whatever, right? A shape you sculpted to really get like a custom looking cloud, or you can merge objects, you know, and similar to our terrain tutorial. So if I did another sphere and we dropped a merge node in between, we would scale this down and we could I don't know, use that. And yeah, you know, you just merge objects in basically. And so let's make this a polygon. Let's increase it a little bit. And polygon mesh. Increase the rows. Let's do, I don't know, 100, 100. And so now we've merged the two objects. And we can move this, you know, to the side or something. Or let's move it to this side. Go up. And so now we've got, you know, this kind of a shape. So yeah, you can get creative, you know, do whatever you guys think you will look like cool shapes. And obviously you want to make several of these. And we'll actually look at making this into a Houdini digital asset, so you can just plug in whatever geometry later. And okay, cool. So let's move on. Let's hit cloud. And so as soon as you start typing cloud, you'll get these cloud nodes. The only ones we really need are regular cloud and cloud noise. So let's drop the cloud first. Let's plug that in, and boom. What's cool about Houdini is we get this nice visual representation in the viewport that gives us a pretty good idea of kind of what's going on. You know, you got the shadows and the basic shape and stuff. And inside, you know, inside the mountain mesh, there's all these settings that you could tweak the noise and stuff. You guys, you know, explore that, but we'll be covering the cloud stuff. So in here you have the sampling, subdivisions, the density, and the density ramp. This we don't really need to worry about because we're going to be controlling all this later with a VOPSOP. But just so you guys kind of get an idea of, if you don't want to make that complex of a cloud and just want something simple, you could just use these settings to, as you can see, obviously increase or decrease the density. So this is good for like really light, wispy fog or clouds. And then you got, you know, your ramp that does the same thing. It lets you kind of control that. So and then the scatter shapes, and so and flatten, and I'll go over this in a second. So in here, in volume, you have the unified sampling divisions. This is basically like the resolution, like think of it that way. So like if you zoom in here, and you can see kind of like, I don't know if it's going to show up in the recording, but you'll see these little boxes, and that's because that's how these are. This is visualized. It's a voxel, and so think of like a 3D pixel. They're little boxes, and so this is your resolution of your 3D pixels, your voxels. And so 50 is really low. Usually 100's a good, you know, you're visualizing. So see how the detail got better. 200 would be pretty good, like quality, like when you're done kind of tweaking and stuff. You don't want to have a high value here while you're still editing your cloud, just because it'll slow down way too much. So you might want to crank this up at the end, you know, 200, 250 or something. And that's what you'll figure out at the end once you're happy with the general preview of the cloud. And so that's what this is. Just remember, uniform sampling divisions. And so next in the scatter shapes, we have these options that you can check on and off. And so filling the source fills shapes inside of it, as you can see. And you can tweak the random seed, the shape size, so like 0.01. That's too little. 0.1. And so what it does is it's filling the source geometry, which was our spheres. And so we'll do that. And let's tweak the noise a little. And let's try 0.5, see what we get. Okay, a little better. Let's try 0.3. Yeah, this is cool. And so as you can see, I mean, we haven't even done much, and we're already starting to get a pretty cool shape, you know. What's really important for this to work well is you have to have a decent starting geometry, you know. So look, go put up reference of clouds and stuff, and then kind of get the basic shape blocked out with geometry or sculpted geometry that you made in ZBrush or whatever, right? And then apply some noise using like a mountain sop, and then that'll give you a good foundation to start building up. And next on here is the secondary shapes. So if we click this on, it adds like extra little shapes. So let's see, if we put this at 0, I don't know, 3, maybe that's too small. Let's try 0, 5. Yeah, you can see these little extra shapes, these little doodads are showing up like right here and stuff. And so you could scatter more or less. You could change the seed. See. So this kind of gives you like a little extra details. And let's change the scale. Maybe a little more. No, less. Couple iterations. And so iterations is kind of like the layering up of it. And so you don't want too many, because you want this to be secondary, you know, as it says. You don't want it to overpower your main cloud shape, but it's a good way to break up the silhouette. And yeah, I think that'll cover that. That's kind of cool. And let's see, tweak the bias. Yeah, that's cool. Cool little extra. Okay, and so flatten. This is like a means of flattening a side of your cloud. And so some clouds, they have flat bottoms. And so this lets you change the flatten origin and the vector X, Y, Z. Obviously, Y is what we want because we want to flatten the bottom. Clouds generally are flat at the bottom. Sometimes they get flattened at the top. But, so yeah, you do that. As you can see, you could tweak the scale that way. Oh, 0. You could change the origin of the flatten. So the position basically where this begins to, the slider begins to influence the flattening of the cloud. So if I change this to, I don't know, 10. The flattening occurs differently. And these numbers are relative to like the scale of your scene. And so this scene's pretty big. And you know, this would probably be something, I don't know, 50 units or something. Let's actually try that. Let's try 50. That's kind of cool. So it's a little flat. Let's go to the secondary shapes actually, and let's see. Maybe let's stretch it. Yeah, let's stretch it maybe in X. Let's try X. Oh. Nah. Let's keep it at 0. Up vector 1. Yeah, no, this is kind of cool. Let's maybe tweak the Z. Let's maybe tweak the X a little. Okay, cool. This looks a good little base. Maybe let's add more, actually, more secondaries. So let's try 0.1. Oh no, yeah, that's way too big. let's go back to 0.5. But increase the scatter point number. Let's try 4 iterations. Let's maybe tweak the seed, see if we find something we like. That's kind of cool. Let's try without filling the source. No, yeah, filling the source is better. Let's try 0.2. Okay, this is cool. This gives us a little bit of breakup. Well, no, maybe that's too much breakup. So let's try 0.3. All right, cool. And so at this point, you know, you could export this if you wanted, but like I said, you could export this, but one of the problems is well, let me actually show you guys. So the best way to actually show this is if you hit tab, start typing volume. So you'll get a whole bunch of nodes in here. But the one you're looking for is this one right here called volume slice. And so what this does is it lets you visualize a volume as a 2D slicer image. So you could use a heat map, infrared, or white to red, or grayscale. Personally, I think grayscale is the easiest. And so as you can tell, basically the density is equal. It's either on or off. There's no variations in the density in the interior, none of that stuff. And so that's really important for, you know, clouds. They're not the same density through and through the entire object. And so one approach we could use to fix this, which I think is the best, is to use a VOPSOP and control the density based on position. And so let's move this to the side and type VOP. And so what you'll get is we're going to go for the volume VOP. So hit enter. We'll put this down. And we'll plug that in. And so if we visualize it, nothing's going on because we haven't done anything. So we're going to keep it actually visualizing with the slice, so we could see the density changes inside. And so we'll dive into this volume VOP. And so right now we have the density going out and just, nothing in between. Let's actually move this a little bit to the side. And so what we need to do is we need to build a couple nodes so that we can adjust the density and add variation to this, because right now it's basically consistent. And so first node we need to drop is a compare. And the reason why we need a compare node is basically we're going to try to say if density is if the density is underneath this number, do this. And so let's connect into input 1. If you guys don't, this might be a little more advanced for some users that aren't too experienced with Houdini. So if you don't understand what's going on, you could just follow along. And I'll be attaching the scene file anyways, so that way you guys can start breaking it down yourself, and you guys can check out the VOPSOP and stuff. And so yeah, we've added the compare, and right now it's on equal. So we don't want equal. What we want is greater than. And so basically saying if density is greater than, and then the number, do this. And so we're going to use a really small number because we want this to happen. So let's try 0.005, and let's plug this into density for now. And so nothing's happening yet because we don't really have anything going on besides that. And so what we want now is a switch. And so right now it's saying if density is greater than 0.005, we need it to now do something. So drop a switch. We'll drop that in here. And so now we need inputs. Right now there's no inputs. It needs an operation. So it needs to say if density is greater than 0.005, do input 1, do this. And so right now obviously we have nothing in there, so it's giving us this error. And so what we need to do is we need to get this density information to be adjusted by the position of voxels inside. So if we zoom in here, that's what P, if you roll over any of these parameters, it'll tell you what they do at the bottom right here. And so P is position. And so, and density is, density. So what we're going to do, let's move this to the side, is we're going to make a noise. So there's a couple different noise systems we could use. We're going to use anti-alias noise just because it's light relatively. And so we're going to get the position, and we're going to input that into position of the noise. And so now we have these different noise parameters that we could tweak, but we'll do that in a second. So if we plug this in to the input, we're basically not getting anything. Nothing's going on. And the reason is because this volume slice is plugged in up here. So let's move this down here, and boom. Now let's dive back into this volume VOP. And so if you check out this AA noise, and we adjust the slider, as you can see, it's giving us different. It's adjusting the interior. So let's make it a little noisy like that. Let's keep the amplitude at 1. Let's tweak the octaves. something like, yeah, something like that's kind of cool. So we get a good amount of variation in the inside. And okay, cool. Now, something else we need is a constant. So start typing constant. And actually, let's make constant input 1. And so right now, it goes black. And the reason is because constant is a constant number. It's, off or on or whatever. And so right now, our constant's 0, so it's all black. And then you have 1. And so let's plug back in now input 2. And as you can see, we're getting a combination of the two. And so this lets you basically fill in the rest of the voxels, just like we had it earlier, where if it was just the solid base without the noise and stuff. And yeah. So anyways, yeah. Let's leave this at 0. We want off. Okay, cool. So now we've got this noise. Now one of the problems is the density of the object isn't a 0 to 1. So like if we go back up and we go to cloud and we scroll up here, you check out density. The base density multiplier of the cloud system is 10. And so we need to actually remap this noise to fit within 10. Right now it's a 0 to 1, off or on kind of thing. And so that's, a problem basically, because it won't work that way. So what we need to do is now we need to, first of all, we have to have a negative and a positive. And right now, this is a float where it's just 0 or 1, off or on. So we need to remap this and fit it into negative and positive. So for that, start typing fit. You'll get this fit range node. And so, boom, we got this node now. And all we got to do now is plug this in. So value in, pipe that out. And it didn't do anything, obviously, because we have, it's just feeding in the information and feeding it out. And so now what we need to do is the source minimum is 0 and 1. And what we want is actually negative. So let's just do negative 0.5. And now you see it brought back in the density, and then 0.5. And so this puts the values back into proper values like we had earlier. And so now if we come back to this noise and we start tweaking stuff, you can see what's going on. Yeah, so you could get really crazy with it. Let's try 2. No, 2's too strong. Point 4 or 3. Let's keep it at 3, I guess. And then you could change also the noise type, simplex, Perlin. But anyways, so now we need to control this even further. And so to do that, we need a ramp. So we start typing ramp, and you will get the ramp parameter. And what this will allow us to do is to tweak the density using a ramp. And so let's plug that in. Plug it back in up here. So let's move all this to the side. And so now we've got the ramp. And what this ramp will let us do is, if we go back up, now at the volume VOP, this ramp parameter is here. And so this lets you, you know, obviously tweak the ramp however you want. So if we, let's use B splines. And let's just drop this node. Oh wait, this is the wrong kind of ramp. This is a color. Yeah, okay, forgot to do this. This is an RGB ramp, color ramp. We don't want that. We want a spline flow ramp. There we go. Okay, now if we come back up, yeah, see, there we go. And so now you could, you know, get real creative with things. And let's just leave it at just that for now. And but now you have this data that you could tweak. So let's go back in. Now the other problem that we have currently is that it's still not fitting in the 10, like we had earlier, the 10 density multiplier of 10. Right now it's still in 0 to 1. And so we got to go in here and type multiply, and you'll get this multiply constant node. And so we drop this in here, and now we got to type 10 in here. And so this puts everything back into the 10. Instead of 0 to 1, we're now in 0 to 10. And so that basically opens it up so we could do proper tweaking of the inside and stuff. So let's start messing around with the noise. Actually, let's see what we can get. Let's try a roughness of 3. That's kind of cool. Some good breakup. And let's actually tweak the density here. Let's try. Maybe the roughness is a little too strong. Let's try 1.5, 1.3. Oh. 1.5. What else? What else? Compare looks fine. Sorry guys, had to take a quick little pause. But where were we? Okay. Yeah, tweaking the inside. So right now it's still too solid, as you can tell. So we got to go back up, and now we got to adjust this ramp that basically controls all the density. And so right now, let's drop this, obviously. And let's raise this. Let's see. That's kind of cool right there. Let's go back to the noise and let's increase the roughness a bit. Maybe that's cool. Let's check out the octaves. Let's try 4. 8. Yeah, that's not too bad. Okay, let's go back up and maybe let's increase this just a tad. Well, no, let's increase it up here. Okay, cool. So now we've got some variation, some spots that are solid, some spots that are missing stuff, and we can control this variation all we want, you know, using this plus the noise parameters. So if we, you know, tweak the numbers in here or change the noise type, you know, simplex gives us a totally different pattern, and you know, mess around with that. And yeah, so let's go back up, and now if we visualize this directly, it's barely visible, so there's not enough density in there. Let's actually now move this, bring back some of that density. And yeah, maybe the noise is a little too strong, so let's work on the roughness a little bit. Let's go back up. Let's see what we had here. A little more density in there. Let's bring this down. Actually, let's try 5. So now it's a little more solid. Let's go back in here. Oh, for some reason, that's why. The multiplier got reset, so this needs to be 10. There we go. And now it's super solid again. Yeah, I was wondering why the 0 to 1 values were acting weird. Okay, so now let's reset this. Let's bring this back down to 1. Okay, cool. And now let's tweak the values. Let's get back in here. Maybe tweak the noise. Let's try simplex. This looks a little better. I actually like the simplex version a little more. And so, okay, let's now increase our resolution just to get a better idea of what's going on. So under the uniform sampling divisions, let's go to 200, hit enter. As you can see, there's variation in the inside. There's spots where it's a little less dense. Let's tweak these now. Whoa. Too much. Let's go back to 0.05. 0.1. Zero one. Let's just see what we get. This might have been too small because it's now lagging to cook. Let's hit cancel. Yeah, let's not do that. That might be... that might take forever to cook this at this resolution. Oh no. Don't fail me. Oh, great. I might have crashed Houdini. Oh, there we go. Okay. Whew. Let's save this, actually. And let's bring this up to 0.1. That's not too bad. And let's go to the secondary shapes. Let's go back to the volume VOP. Okay, this looks cool. This is a good little bass. And now a node we're missing that I just totally remembered about. That's actually really important. That would give this details now is the cloud noise. So let's drop this in before the volume VOP. And let's actually drop down the resolution a tad just so we don't get these delays. So let's keep this at 100 for now. Huh. That's weird. Let's save. That's pretty weird. It shouldn't have done that. So let's it's not cooking for some reason. Okay, that might be a bug. because it should be showing something. So let's save that and reopen that. Wow, that's really weird. Really weird. Let's disconnect. So we've got our geometry. And, that's super strange. Yeah, for some reason this node is not. I think I broke it. I don't know. That's pretty weird. Yeah, for some reason something went wrong with this node. Yeah, I don't know. I've never had that happen. Strange. So, let's, guess we got no choice but to copy these settings. So let's do that real quick. Oh, there we go. The size is too small. 0.1. Is that what it is? Oh no. Nope, that's not what it is. Or is it 0.1? Let's see. Okay, yeah. That's what it is. I'm come on, undo. My mistake. I probably accidentally hit this too small a little earlier when I wasn't really paying attention. Okay, we're back on track. All right, so now this cloud noise does exactly what it says it does. It adds these little noise patterns to the sides, as you can see. So let's actually increase the quality a little bit. Let's go up to 100, just so we could better see. Yeah, there we could visualize these little details. And so there's a couple things you could do. You can mask the noise. There's advecting the noise. There's the noise settings, obviously. And so we'll basically adjust the element size or the octaves or spatial scale, something, you know, to start tweaking this. So let's drop the element size to 0.1. And so that right out of the bat gave us all these little cool little extra clumpage and detail. But maybe that's a little too small. Let's try 0.2. That's a little better. So now we've got these little floaty bits, and that's what this node's basically for. It's for adding all these little tiny little details and floating pieces. And so if we combine, let's just check out where we're at now. And we combine it with the volume VOP. Now we've got this nice variation on the inside density because of the volume VOP. And we've also got these breakups on the shape. And so, okay, cool. You know, we've got this, And this is all, you know, customizable. Again, we could totally do things to move it around. See? And adjust the geometry. And so you could input whatever, you know, like I said, get creative. So this stage is crucial. Get creative and make cool shapes. And let's adjust this a little more so it's not too dense. Yeah, this is sweet. Okay, this is cool. Alright, now we've got this cloud. So this is where you could do several things. We could write this out as an open VDB file. We can render it in Houdini directly. So if we do the usual, make a redshift ROP, let's make a light. So drop a light in here, and move this up. And instead of a directional light, we'll actually use what's it called? Or a distant light. We'll use an area light. And let's make another one. Well, yeah, we'll just leave it at 1 for now, because I'll cover shading this in Maya, and you'll see just, you know, proper light setup and all that stuff. I'm just going to do a basic covering of this in Houdini. And but the same principles apply. It's the same way you'd shade it in any app. So let's name this cloud. And let's save this. And so, like all these volumetric assets in Houdini, if you want to just shade them directly without exporting them as OpenVDB and importing them again, you have to add the object parameters right here. So have your node selected, hit obj params, and then you'll get this new Redshift OBJ tab. And so under here, there's this volume section. Click on that, make sure it knows this is a volume enabled object. And since this isn't a VDB, you're going to need to use volume VDB Houdini primitive. So check that on. And okay, let's see what we got. Let's actually, oh, well, we also need to make a material. So let's go to matte context, and at the bottom, once you start typing volume, you'll get this RS volume, and that's what this is. And so this already has density mapped onto it, and we'll check this on, obviously, so it shows up as a material. So let's go back to object context, and let's go to render material. Let's look for that material under matte context, RS volume, and now the material is applied. Okay, cool. So let's go to our Redshift ROP. Make sure we've got GI on. So for, you know, we're just going to use brute force. All volumetric calculations, by the way, are done with brute force GI. So even if you're using Irradiance Cache and Irradiance Point Cloud, volumetrics are still calculated with brute force GI, no matter what. So you got to make sure you got, you know, you crank these up. And so let's just crank this up to 128, and let's just do 64. And we'll just do some overrides for the light. 128. Volume 128. And so the volume obviously affects the volumetric noise, the sampling. And so, okay, cool. We've got a basic setup. Let's hit Control 1 so we save this. Let's go into our cloud and hit Control 2 so we save this area. And let's go to our material and hit Control 3. So that way, if you hit 1, 2, or 3 on your keyboard, you'll bounce around. So this is pretty useful. And okay, so let's start up the IPR. So let's open up the new Redshift render view. And we've got tons of white. And so let's lock the camera and see what we're looking at. I'm pretty sure it's because of the ground. And it is. Okay, so let's change the ground shader. So let's jump to 3 and type in material. Let's get an RS material in here. So we've got that going. Let's drop that down. And so cool. Now we've got an RS material. And so you might be wondering, why isn't the light that we've got here influencing the volume? And so the reason is because all Redshift lights have option to control volumetric influence. And so that's right here, and it happens to be at the bottom right here under the light swatch for Houdini. And so you got contribution scale. And so what this does is, if we just crank this up, it influences. It's still subtle, but that's because the light's probably not bright enough. But let me increase the light strength. So let's, I don't know. Yeah, let's try something higher. Let's use temperature. Let's use like a daytime temperature. Something like 5200. And so if we go back down here, the volume contribution scale, basically if you adjust this, it's the influence the light has on the volumetric. And so cool. We've got, our shaded volume doing its thing. And so now how can we export this? How can we get this out and use it in other apps or other render engines or whatever, right? And so one of the ways of doing that is using OpenVDB. And so let's pause this. Let's just close it. And the way to do this is we'll go into our cloud. And speaking of which, we should probably set this up. If you want, you could build a Houdini, what's it called? A Houdini digital asset, an HDA, out of these nodes. And that way it's just a single node, a subgroup, and you just plug in your geometry and it spits out, your cloud. But it's a good idea to learn how to build stuff like this anyways, instead of just relying on the Houdini digital asset. But you could do that. So you could just select the nodes, new digital asset from selection, you give it a name, blah 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 blah, and like cloud subnet, and it'll give you this Houdini digital asset that you can then plug in, and inside you got all this stuff. But for our purposes, we'll just keep it out here so that way we could see what's going on with each of these nodes. And so let's just delete that. But that's something you could do on your own, and make your own subgroup Houdini digital assets, so you could just keep it for future use. And okay, so anyways, exporting this. So how do we get this exported? So if we hit file, we get the or actually not file. Yeah, file is it's a node for importing or exporting stuff. And so we're going to hook this up. And right now it's on read file mode. And so we want to actually write a file. So I already got one cloud in here, but we'll make another one. So cloud 002.vdb. And so you got to give it the file extension VDB, and that way Houdini will know what to do. It'll just write the VDB. But right now it's in read file mode, so let's move that to write file, and let's activate it. And so if we open up our folder, it's here, cloud 2. And so right now it's only 848 KB, which is tiny, and that's probably just due to the resolution. So yeah, we're at 100. So let's try 250. So that's a little bit larger. It's going to take a little bit to cook the nodes and then eventually write it. And so as you can see, the quality got better. If we oh well, it looks like our lights are influencing it. So yeah, if we turn them off, we could see that the quality's a lot nicer. Lots of little subtleties. And now that the quality's a lot higher, the exported file is now 11 megs, which is tiny still. Once you guys learn more about like pyro effects and all that stuff, you're going to be writing out caches of VDBs. And even though the VDB format is super efficient, it still can get huge. You could still get huge gigs and gigs of data. But these are just basic little clouds, so there's nothing too complicated. And so, okay, let's save this scene out. And we'll be taking the VDBs that we just made, and we'll be taking that into Maya, and we'll shade it in there, just so you guys can see the process of importing the clouds we made and stuff. Alright guys, I'm gonna pause this for a second. Alright guys, we're in Maya now, and I've just got a basic light set up. Ground light, a skylight, a dome light, and this big directional light that's matching the sun direction. And so if we let's just open up the render view. We just hit play. Just got this HDR, sun's in this direction, and that's about it. And so let's pause that, move that out of the way. So first things first, we're going to load. So under Redshift, you got volume. and we're going to pick volume with the material. And so that makes this volume node. I already have a few that I imported before, but we're making a new one from scratch. And so we've got this box that appears. And so all we got to do is we just have to load up our cloud. So here's the cloud we just made, number 2. So we're going to hit OK, open, and you'll just see that the bounding box is a little bigger, but you can't see what's in here. So to see what's in there, you got to click up here to either points or points with bounding box. So I like points with bounding box, and that kind of gives you a little idea of the general shape of the voxels and what's going on inside. And so let's increase the scale. And cool. So now we've got our basic cloud. And right here is where you would have motion blur if you had velocity grids and stuff. We don't. You also have the number of points to display. So if you change this to like a 5, it's a little more detailed to just give you a better viewport preview. And that's the thing about that, since it's an open VDB, we can only preview it this way. And that's the cool thing about Houdini. You could actually see it, shaded in viewport. But yeah. And at the bottom here under info, any open VDB file you bring in has data. And so explosions and stuff usually have like heat, temperature, that type of voxel data. Since this is just a cloud, all we have is density. And so, okay, we have this volume node now. And so this is the volume node that's attached to this object. And so if we go in here, under scatter, we need to add density. So if you right click it, you'll get all the options that the file has, or you could type them in manually. So we'll just pick density. We don't have any emission, so this is where you'd put, temperature, heat, stuff like that if this was an explosive, but it's not. So yeah, just leave that blank. And okay, cool. And again, our lights that we made, except for the dome light, I generally don't like using too much volume contribution on a dome light. I'll use a little bit, but usually dome lights overpower your volumetric just because there's light coming from everywhere from the HDR. So a little bit's nice just to give it a little bit of lighting all over that's influenced by the HDR. But too much overpowers it. So you want to actually build area lights that give you a little more control, and these are the ones you adjust the contribution for, and the brightness and the color and all that stuff. And so what's pretty neat is you could duplicate these and use the same thing but scale it, move it around to make more complex shapes. So a good thing to do is you make several open VDB clouds, different types of shapes and stuff in Houdini, and then you kind of like put it all together, like think Legos or something, where you have the building block shapes of different clouds and you start putting them together. So some clouds might be a little more misty and stretched and long, and that's why I was saying, look up reference. So like some clouds might be long, some might be cumulus, just look up the different cloud types and try to make your own. And that way you'll have a little library, just like we did with our plants that we were shading in the first course. And you'll have a little library of, 10, 15, whatever, many clouds. And then you could put them together in your own scenes and swap in and swap out different clouds. And so the way this works is it's actually instancing automatically. As long as your volume is using the same data for the OpenVDB, Redshift automatically assumes it's going to instance it. So you don't have to worry about making sure that this is an instance copy or any of that stuff. As long as the same volume file is being referenced, it will instance it automatically. And so, okay, cool. Let's press, play on this and see what we get. All right, so we've got this cloud. Right out of the gate, the shape, as you can see, it's got nice variation, like we were talking about that with the volume VOP, where we had to hollow out some of the insides, so there's variation in densities. And so it's not the same density across the whole thing, that's not what you want. And so we got a nice little breakup and stuff like that. But right now the shader is obviously way too dark. It's, black. And so this is more like of a smoke volume shader. So let's move that up and let's click on the volume. And let's change out our sRGB gamma. Let's try something better. Let's try OCIO. And let's look for that. OCIO. Maybe we'll try ASUS. Might be too strong. Yeah, that's due to the way that Redshift reads the input files right now. It doesn't fully support ASUS unless we're doing it through color. The color nodes aren't being read properly, so it's probably not a good idea to use this right now. And unfortunately, it should be available very soon, but the render view, this new render view, is very new for Maya and Houdini, so it's still missing some cool features, but they are coming. So let's just use Filmic, which gives a nice little desaturated but realistic looking vibe to it. And yeah, let's adjust the well, I got worried it was going to crash right there. Let's adjust the photographic shader. So under lens, let's create a photographic exposure, and let's put in 0.8 so we can get a lot of overexposure. Let's put a 0.2 for black crush, and for saturation, let's bump this up to 1.5 so we get a nice saturated kind of sky. And let's change the f-stop. Let's bump it up to, like, I don't know, 11. Let's try 10. 10's nice. Okay, cool. So now we've got nice contrast. We got this nice rich blue. We've got this nice, contrast in the darks and the light. So okay, let's get back to the shader. And so right now there's just not enough light being scattered in here. It's acting like it's super dense. And so we could change that by increasing the scattering. So let's try to get our lights, our lightest lights, to be something close to this, to the reference that we have in the background. So that's actually pretty good. And now it's more about the lighting, I think. I think the ground light right now is a little too warm. So that would be this light. Let's make sure that's what it is. So maybe the dome light. Let's decrease the contribution. As you can see, this is why I was saying the dome light contributes way too much. If we increase this, I mean, look at that. 1 is just way too strong. So let's stick to maybe 0.3. 0.3 looks pretty good. And let's rotate around. So right now the bottom is catching a lot of the I think the light from the HDR actually, because of the ground is that brown color, and so it seems like it's being really influenced by the HDR. So let's actually turn this down even more. So there's only a little bit of influence from the ground. And let's increase our big light. What this is. Let's try. Let's try increasing the strength on this. So let's, if we do a 1, intensity of 1, 2, it's way too much. Let's try 1. Let's go back. Maybe the HDR is working, but our scattering is too strong, maybe in the shader. Or not strong enough, I should say. Let's see. Let's tweak the slider. See, if we bring this down, it's basically not catching any light. So maybe something like that. Maybe let's change this from black to maybe a gray. No. Let's keep that at black. Let's move it maybe a little this way. No. What about the absorption? Okay, we want to go the other way. Let's go to 0.8. And let's see. So it's absorbing a little less. So it's not as dense. And let's adjust the ramp. And let's use a spline. Okay. And let's get back to the dome light and decrease the contribution. Let's turn back on that ground light so we get a little bit of brown down here. Let's maybe decrease it just a tad. And yeah, there we go. Sweet. So now we could duplicate this, and get creative. Just Control D. And as you can see, it got darker because it's a duplicate in the same exact place. And so the density of these objects overlaps. So if we move things like that, maybe rotate, Maybe stretch. Maybe shrink this down. Move it a little bit this way. Maybe squeeze it down a little bit. Pull it out. Rotate. Move it this way. Lift it up. And you could quickly start, you know, building up some really cool stuff. I mean, just like that. You know, we built up some pretty cool clouds that do a pretty good job of looking like clouds and blending in. And so as you can see, yeah, this, you could just go wild from here, you know. So start adding more clouds, getting, you know, you have more shapes, etc., etc. And just overall get creative. So let's pause that. Let's open up our render settings and let's give an HD render a shot. And so let's pump this up to 256. Or actually 512. Check our overrides. 512, 512. Alright, cool. And so let's fire off a full render. And just like that, we've got our clouds. And so hopefully you guys, you know, learned some new stuff. Learn how to make some cool clouds, and you guys can get creative. I mean, you could use a boat shape if you wanted as your imported instead of some spheres like I did, and make a cloud boat thing, you know. You could use whatever. And so it really lets you get creative in the way you assemble things and move them around. And then Redshift, obviously being super fast at rendering, makes this a lot more fun since you're not waiting forever for complex volumetric rendering. You're just, you know, cranking it out basically live. And yeah, cool. All right, guys, cheers till the next tutorial.